Thank you, Chairman. Grazie al Presidente dell'Istituto, che non vedo. Dov'è? Eccolo. Grazie al Presidente De Gennaro per aver organizzato questo incontro e per avermi dato l'opportunità di intervenire. Oggi, come peraltro avevo annunciato allo stesso Presidente, è un giorno particolare perché è l'indomani di un importante Consiglio europeo per la giustizia e per gli affari interni che si è svolto ieri a Lussemburgo. Quindi, come si dice in Italia, stiamo sul pezzo, perché anche ieri il tema che ha riguardato i foreign fighters è stato uno dei due grandi temi del Consiglio. L'altro è stato quello riguardante le migrazioni, l'altro è stato quello riguardante il rapporto tra il sud e il nord del mondo. Io svolgerò questo mio intervento facendo alcune considerazioni che ho già svolto al Parlamento italiano e altre che invece svolgo appositamente qui. E sono molto lieto che il formato preveda questa significativa partnership ideale tra l'Italia e gli Stati Uniti d'America. E sono altresì molto contento che oggi questo dibattito si svolga mentre l'Italia presiede il semestre europeo e quindi a me è toccato per le circostanze di presiedere il Consiglio dei Ministri dell'Interno, perché io credo che alla base di tutto vi sia la cooperazione internazionale e specificamente la cooperazione nell'ambito di quell'Occidente che noi riteniamo sia unico. Noi pensiamo che non vi siano due Occidenti. Non crediamo che un mare, per quanto grande, grande come un oceano, possa separare fisicamente due lembi del nostro mondo, e cioè la riva ovest dell'Europa e la riva est degli Stati Uniti d'America. Noi non crediamo che per quanto sia grande quel mare possa separare il principio per cui la persona è l'elemento centrale, quindi la centralità della persona, e la fede nella democrazia e nella libertà. L'idea della centralità della persona, della sua insopprimibile originalità, della fede nella democrazia e la fede nella libertà uniscono le due sponde dell'Atlantico in un unico grande Occidente, quell'Occidente di democrazia e di libertà che oggi insieme, non da solo, insieme ad un pezzo di mondo arabo viene sfidato da una nuova grande sfida, che è la sfida che viene portata dall'Islamic State, dall'ISIS. E già fa impressione dire questa parola, state, perché noi siamo di fronte ad una organizzazione che ha ambizioni che nessuno ha mai avuto, uomini pronti a combattere che nessuno ha mai avuto, solidarietà fortunatamente individuali in Occidente che nessuno ha mai avuto, soldi che nessuno ha mai avuto. Noi siamo in presenza di una organizzazione terroristica talmente violenta da essere stata espulsa da Al-Qaeda e siamo in presenza di una ambizione che è l'origine di una organizzazione, secondo uno schema per cui la ambizione, che è quella di farsi Stato, fa da premessa ad una organizzazione sul territorio, una organizzazione che anche Al-Qaeda non aveva. E vi sono dei fatti nuovi che devono inquietare tutti coloro i quali sono sfidati da questa grande organizzazione, da questa grande missione. Vi sono dei fatti nuovi, le modalità di reclutamento, le modalità di finanziamento, le modalità di partecipazione dei soggetti stranieri che non hanno la necessità di iscriversi a questa organizzazione, ma che nella veste di Halon Actors, di Lone Wolves, come foreign fighters, possono contribuire al progetto realizzando anche quella strategia che molti analisti hanno chiamato dei 1000 tagli, la strategia secondo cui attraverso 1000 tagli si può dissanguare il nemico. Poco più di un mese fa, alla vigilia del 13° anniversario dell'attentato delle Torri Gemelle, il presidente Obama ha parlato alla nazione e ha chiesto alla comunità internazionale di promuovere una coalizione per lottare contro l'Islamic State, una nuova minaccia globale proprio per le sue potenzialità espansive e destabilizzanti. Non perché non vi sia stato in passato il terrorismo, ma perché è una forma nuova. E il terrorismo è sovversione sistematica di valori assoluti, di tradizioni religiose, di appartenenze culturali, di diritti e di libertà. Il terrorismo e l'antiterrorismo sono entrati prepotentemente nella vita degli stati, delle società e degli individui dell'intero pianeta, modificando il concetto stesso di sicurezza e di sovranità. In più, il terrorismo internazionale di matrice religiosa, nella sua versione più evoluta e aggressiva, veste anche abiti europei, muovendosi talvolta insospettabile tra insospettabili e lasciando che venga lanciata una sfida senza precedenti alla sicurezza globale. E quando dico terrorismo internazionale di matrice religiosa, so bene di dire un qualcosa che va oltre l'intenzione, perché dico di un qualcosa che è una strumentalizzazione, un prendere a pretesto la religione per sovvertire un ordine legale. Ma la religione è un pretesto, non è la radice sostanziale della sua azione. In questa veste, fino ad oggi sconosciuta, l'estremismo islamico si pone come una nuova minaccia, aprendo uno scontro innanzitutto intorno al mondo islamico e riacutizzando una contrapposizione nei confronti, come dicevo poc'anzi, della sicurezza globale e anche specificamente di quella occidentale. Il presidente Obama ha, a mio avviso, molto correttamente affrontato con realismo la questione dell'Islamic State, dicendo di non cadere nella trappola dello scontro tra civiltà, e specificando che l'Islamic State non è l'Islam ma una mera organizzazione terrorista. Così ha detto in un suo recente discorso. E come dimostrano anche i dati e le immagini provenienti dall'Iraq e dalla Siria, lo Stato islamico sta colpendo anche oltre, perché colpisce le minoranze cristiane e gli yazidi, soprattutto i musulmani, quindi cristiani, yazidi, ma soprattutto i musulmani. Il consenso al califfato giunge da altre organizzazioni criminali, restando quindi nella illegalità. E tuttavia in giugno gli stessi ribelli siriani, comprese alcune fazioni dichiaratamente islamiste come Islamic Front, hanno bollato la creazione del califfato come un'azione ridicola, nulla e priva di validità, opinione sposata anche dai paesi della Lega Araba. E d'altro canto in Iraq si è assistito ad una campagna di solidarietà da parte dei musulmani nei confronti delle minoranze cacciate dalla città di Mosul e dai villaggi della piana di Ninive. Alcuni analisti e commentatori hanno ipotizzato che la crisi in atto in Medio Oriente finirà per approfondire non solo le divisioni tra gli Stati europei, ma anche per evidenziare una crescente divaricazione di interessi tra le due sponde dell'Atlantico cui prima facevo riferimento. Ebbene, dalla mia prospettiva di Homeland Security, forse parziale, ma certo non secondaria in rapporto alle questioni di sicurezza, posso affermare che, a mio avviso, questa ipotesi non ha fondamento. Come sapete, uno dei punti caratterizzanti la presidenza di turno dell'Unione Europea è proprio la promozione delle relazioni tra Unione Europea e Stati Uniti, ed io stesso, in quanto presidente di turno, sarò il mese prossimo a Washington ad incontrare il collega della Homeland Security e l'Attorney General. Prendiamo, a proposito di collaborazione, proprio il caso dei foreign fighters. Non ho bisogno di ricordare a voi quanto limpidamente l'attentato compiuto lo scorso maggio al Museo ebraico di Bruxelles da un foreign fighters di rientro dalla Siria abbia mostrato la nostra vulnerabilità e l'acutezza della minaccia posta da questa nuova categoria di terroristi. Tanto più, non ho bisogno di ricordarlo, che i dati, quelli in nostro possesso, ma sono dati che credo siano altamente condivisi, indicano che il numero di cittadini stranieri, e specificamente i cittadini europei ed americani arruolati da formazioni terroristiche, è in costante crescita. E il problema principale è acquisire e condividere informazioni sui movimenti dei foreign fighters per limitarne la mobilità. Ed è ovvio che in un contesto di mobilità globale di massa l'unico modo efficace per ottenerle è l'ulteriore rafforzamento della collaborazione tra Unione Europea e Stati Uniti, come entrambe le parti non hanno mancato di concordare in un quadro di convergenza di intenti e di reciproca fiducia. In base agli allarmi lanciati in questi mesi dal responsabile europeo per l'antiterrorismo Gilles de Kerchove, è evidente che la questione del califfato islamico e l'impatto globale dei terroristi dell'Islamic State impone un'azione congiunta tra Stati Uniti d'America e Unione Europea. E secondo il nostro capo, il capo europeo dell'antiterrorismo, in meno di un mese il numero dei combattenti provenienti dall'Europa che ha risposto alla chiamata dello Stato islamico è passato da 2.000 a 3.000. 2.000 a 3.000. Gli aumenti corrispondono alla proclamazione del califfato avvenuta nel giugno scorso e coinvolgono soprattutto giovani militanti solitari entrati in contatto con l'ideologia e gli uomini di al-Baghdadi attraverso internet e in seguito partiti per la Siria sfruttando il loro passaporto europeo. È recente, il 24 settembre scorso, la deliberazione del Consiglio di sicurezza dell'ONU, la 2178, la risoluzione contro i combattenti stranieri, che vincola gli Stati membri ad agire in una direzione di criminalizzazione dei viaggi all'estero per scopi di terrorismo. E anche noi agiremo in questo senso, lo avevo preannunciato, ma a breve porterò in Consiglio dei Ministri alcune norme che rafforzeranno le misure di prevenzione e contrasto contro le organizzazioni che possono agire per reclutare, ma più specificamente contro coloro i quali, pur non essendo considerabili reclutatori, abbiano intenzione di andare a combattere presso un teatro di guerra straniero. Proprio in sintonia con le deliberazioni del Consiglio di sicurezza dell'ONU, ieri il Consiglio per la giustizia e gli affari interni dell'Unione Europea ha dato il via alla elaborazione di una serie di misure verso i foreign fighters che verranno discusse al Consiglio prossimo, quello di dicembre. Fra queste a me preme sottolinearne una, perché mi sembra quella centrale, sulla quale abbiamo chiesto e ottenuto un'accelerazione del rapporto con il Parlamento europeo, perché non si potrebbe portare a compimento senza il consenso del Parlamento europeo, e mi riferisco a quella che riguarda il PNR, cioè il Passenger Name Record, che verrà finalizzato entro dicembre ed attraverso il quale gli Stati dell'Unione Europea cercheranno di bloccare il reclutamento dei foreign fighters e i loro spostamenti da e per il Medio Oriente attraverso un sistema congiunto di controllo dei voli aerei, uscita ed entrata entro i confini dell'Unione e sfruttando le banche dati del sistema di informazione Schengen e dell'Interpol. L'Europa, e mi preme qui specificarlo con orgoglio, sta lavorando unita e unita collaborerà con gli Stati Uniti d'America. Gli Stati membri più colpiti dal fenomeno dei foreign fighters hanno condiviso le loro competenze e questo in un tempo di recupero geloso di sovranità nazionali è un dato molto importante. La Francia cura il migliore utilizzo del sistema informazione di Schengen. Il Regno Unito guida il settore delle comunicazioni strategiche. I Paesi Bassi portano avanti un progetto sulle informazioni di viaggio. L'Italia ha istituito squadre multinazionali ad hoc per lottare contro i combattenti stranieri e ha adottato misure per contrastare sul suo territorio i cosiddetti lone wolves. Questo know-how strategico verrà condiviso con tutti i Paesi dell'Unione Europea, anche quelli al di fuori del Trattato di Schengen, cosa che è già avvenuta ieri nell'ambito del cosiddetto COMIX, che è una forma estesa di riunione del Consiglio di Giustizia e Affari Interni dell'Unione Europea, aperto, ed è questo il significato del mix, ad altri Paesi che pur non aderendo a Schengen condividono la scelta e la responsabilità di fare fluidificare e circolare le informazioni in nostro possesso. Queste operazioni mostrano una risposta pronta e dinamica e condivisa da parte dei Paesi dell'Unione e avverranno queste risposte in coordinamento con la Commissione europea, che ha stanziato delle somme per la creazione di un team di consulenza delle comunicazioni strategiche in Siria. Certo, e lo ricordo anche con un po' di rammarico, e lo ricordo nella mia veste anche di presidente della Fondazione De Gasperi. Il presidente De Gasperi morì con il grande rimpianto che la costruzione e l'architettura europea fosse difettosa perché mancante, perché carente della comunità europea di difesa. E oggi ci rendiamo conto di quanto lui avesse ragione. Oggi ci rendiamo conto di quanto manchi alla costruzione europea la esistenza di una più forte unione in materia di difesa. Deve essere una priorità per il futuro dell'Europa. La condivisione di responsabilità dell'Unione Europea verso la minaccia dell'Islamic State non riguarda solo il punto dei foreign fighters, ma anche altri dossier legati alla nostra sicurezza, dalla lotta alla criminalità organizzata alle politiche migratorie, dalla sicurezza dei trasporti e delle frontiere all'attività di contrasto della tratta di esseri umani, all'azione di prevenzione e di contrasto al cybercrime. E per quanto attiene alla materia specifica del cybercrime, anche in Italia noi abbiamo costituito una squadra ad hoc che nell'ambito della cosiddetta polizia postale si occupa specificamente di questo settore. Mentre per quanto riguarda la materia migratoria, ieri il Consiglio europeo di giustizia e affari interni ha deliberato con il termine Triton, figlio di Poseidone nella mitologia greca, la nascita di un'operazione di pattugliamento della frontiera marittima europea secondo il mandato dell'agenzia Frontex, quindi a 30 miglia dalla costa italiana, e da ciò conseguirà la conclusione della operazione Mare Nostrum. È un'operazione, quella Frontex Plus, chiamata in origine, adesso chiamata Triton, che sarà gestita dall'agenzia Frontex, che si occupa esattamente delle frontiere. Con questa scelta la nostra Unione Europea torna a presidiare le proprie frontiere e questo ha una inevitabile ricaduta positiva in termini di sicurezza. Dicevo poco fa che tra poco più di un mese a Washington tutto ciò sarà al centro dell'incontro ministeriale tra i ministri dell'interno e della giustizia della presidenza di turno dell'Unione Europea e gli omologhi degli Stati Uniti, e le stesse riunioni preparatorie hanno confermato l'ampia convergenza di vedute dei massimi esperti europei con i massimi esperti statunitensi non soltanto sui singoli filoni del dialogo transatlantico, ma anche sulla cornice concettuale ed operativa nella quale inserire queste azioni. E un esempio di questa sinergia euro-americana darà maggiore concretezza a ciò che sto dicendo, perché un altro aspetto della minaccia terroristica riguarda la sicurezza dei trasporti, specie per il pericolo dell'introduzione di nuovi tipi di esplosivi all'interno dei nostri confini. L'Unione Europea e gli Stati Uniti procedono d'intesa e hanno dato vita a solidi meccanismi operativi basati su regolari incontri di esperti finalizzati alla condivisione delle informazioni dei risultati della ricerca e della formazione. L'utilità di questa collaborazione è evidente ed è comune alle due sponde dell'Atlantico la volontà di andare avanti, di svilupparla ulteriormente. E inoltre hanno una grande importanza le azioni sulla rete e il mondo dei social media. Le primavere arabe e le crisi in Siria hanno mostrato la facilità con cui il terrorismo riesce a mobilitare, radicalizzare e arruolare i giovani. E rispetto a questo fenomeno incontriamo la difficoltà di intervenire nella chiusura di siti online registrati presso paesi extraeuropei. Ed è quindi alla luce dei vincoli tecnologici e normativi, vincoli ovviamente derivanti dalle giurisdizioni nazionali, che si comprende come la cooperazione internazionale tra Stati Uniti ed Europa assume il rilievo di un fattore chiave per l'efficacia della prevenzione. A questo proposito, proprio 2 sere fa, abbiamo organizzato a Lussemburgo, insieme alla commissario Cecilia Malmström, una importante riunione con i rappresentanti di 4 colossi della rete: Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Facebook. Perché la premessa è che l'attacco non è solo ai governi, è ai popoli. E quindi i grandi attori che sulla rete gestiscono le communities possono essere dei partner strategici, indispensabili per rendere più efficace il monitoraggio e il controllo dei contenuti in una difficilissima ricerca di un punto di equilibrio tra la sicurezza e altro valore fondamentale che è quello della riservatezza delle comunicazioni, ossia della privacy. Quindi nella ricerca di quel punto di equilibrio una collaborazione tra i governi e questi colossi dovrà essere sempre più ricercata e sempre più ottenuta, e devo dire che è davvero soddisfacente la risposta che abbiamo avuto in termini di disponibilità a collaborare in questa direzione. Potrei moltiplicare gli esempi, ma quello che mi preme soprattutto porre in luce è che rispetto alle crisi in atto in Medio Oriente tra Europa e Stati Uniti c'è intesa, c'è accordo, c'è volontà di rafforzare sempre di più questa intesa e questo accordo, e l'accordo riguarda sia le valutazioni della minaccia, sia l'approccio generale alla minaccia, sia gli strumenti di contrasto, la valutazione, le informazioni, l'approccio generale, gli strumenti di contrasto. Europa e Stati Uniti sono sostanzialmente d'accordo non solo sull'approccio generale, ma anche rispetto alla strategia generale di contrasto, che dovrà sempre di più fondarsi sull'integrazione di soft power e hard power, cioè su un mix intelligente, ragionato, oculato di diplomazia, di intelligence, di law enforcement, con lo strumento militare, con una probabile e progressiva prevalenza del primo sul secondo, aggiungo, auspicata prevalenza del soft power sull'hard power. E la ragione è duplice. In primo luogo, benché io trovi del tutto legittima l'aspirazione degli Stati Uniti a una maggiore assunzione di responsabilità da parte europea in Medio Oriente, richiesta e ambizione legittima, non possiamo ignorare che allo Stato un apporto militare significativo dell'Europa in quanto tale non è immediato, a mio avviso. Al contrario, un contributo europeo declinato in termini di soft power esiste già oggi, è rodato, è fruttuoso, può dare frutti ancora più rigogliosi. Di conseguenza è logico che Bruxelles e Washington concordino sull'obiettivo di rafforzarlo, il soft power, adattandolo alle situazioni sul terreno. E in secondo luogo, se è certo che il soft power costa di meno, non è detto che i risultati derivanti dal buon uso dei suoi strumenti siano inferiori a quelli derivanti dall'impiego dello strumento militare. Anche per questo motivo, quindi, e in un'ottica di analisi costi-benefici, credo che nel prossimo periodo la collaborazione tra Stati Uniti ed Europa in Medio Oriente abbia più probabilità di svilupparsi e produrre risultati positivi nel campo delle politiche di sicurezza di cui si occupano i ministri dell'interno, che io oggi ho l'onore anche di rappresentare qui, piuttosto che nell'ambito dei ministri della difesa. Me ne convinco sempre di più perché le politiche di sicurezza, di homeland security, pur nella loro diversità, sono accomunate da alcuni elementi che ritengo molto qualificanti. Il primo, la inestricabile sovrapposizione di profili di sicurezza interna e di sicurezza esterna, che comporta la necessità di solidi meccanismi di coordinamento tra le agenzie di law enforcement, di attori globali come gli Stati Uniti e l'Unione Europea. Quindi ci sono questi profili di sicurezza interna ed esterna che vengono a rappresentare un mix inestricabile. E questo è un elemento qualificante dell'azione tra Stati Uniti e Unione Europea. L'attenzione ai paesi terzi, dato che la sicurezza interna degli Stati Uniti e dell'Unione Europea comincia al di fuori dei rispettivi confini nazionali, non è nei rispettivi territori che comincia l'azione sulla sicurezza interna ai territori, comincia oltre, e in quest'ottica dobbiamo promuovere iniziative di assistenza tecnica che siano mirate a rafforzare lo Stato di diritto, il consolidamento istituzionale, le agenzie di law enforcement dei paesi terzi like-minded, attraverso programmi di formazione e condivisione di conoscenza e di buone pratiche, e dobbiamo rendere tali azioni coerenti con le nostre esigenze di sicurezza e la nostra comune valutazione della minaccia. Terzo elemento, la comune propensione a fondare la cooperazione transatlantica nel settore del law enforcement sempre più sulla ricerca, che richiede adeguati mezzi finanziari sulla formazione e sulla condivisione dei risultati dell'una e dell'altra, cioè sia sulla ricerca che sulla formazione. E infine, quarto esempio, il comune intendimento di rafforzare la tutela delle libertà fondamentali come componente essenziale di politiche di sicurezza interna centrate sulla persona. Ecco, se questi sono gli elementi salienti che fanno da sfondo e da collante alle politiche transatlantiche di sicurezza interna, allora davvero non riesco a qualificare altrimenti che come largamente convergente l'approccio europeo e statunitense alle sfide che abbiamo di fronte. E l'utilità della sinergia euro-americana è tanto grande quanto lo è la nostra comune determinazione a farla avanzare verso nuovi e più ambiziosi traguardi nell'interesse dei nostri cittadini, della sicurezza e della pace internazionale. Perché, senza volere abusare della citazione di Roosevelt, del presidente Roosevelt e del rapporto tra le 4 libertà fondamentali, è bene però proprio in questo contesto citare Roosevelt e ricordare che non c'è una vera libertà se non si è liberi dalla paura. Ecco perché il diritto alla sicurezza diventa componente essenziale del diritto di libertà, perché non c'è libertà se non c'è sicurezza. E l'idea che il mondo sia un posto sicuro nel quale vivere, in ogni angolo del mondo c'è un problema di sicurezza. E ciascuno Stato ha dato una risposta che poi ha finito per essere coniugale rispetto al diritto di libertà e alla democrazia in quel paese. Meno sicurezza vi è in un paese, meno libertà vi è in quel paese. E allora la sfida dell'Islamic State sta lì a dirci che il lungo cammino verso la democrazia, il lungo cammino verso la libertà, il lungo cammino verso la tutela dei diritti personali e umani essenziali e fondamentali è un cammino lungo che ha dato grande successo ma che non si è ancora concluso. E in quel cammino oggi il mondo incontra ed incrocia una nuova minaccia. Difenderci da quella minaccia, sconfiggere questi terroristi sarà l'ennesimo contributo che i popoli liberi e democratici che continuano a amare della libertà daranno al completamento di quella lunga e perigliosa strada verso la libertà e la democrazia nel mondo. Vi ringrazio.
That is a very important scene setter. Ambassador Musharraf Khattab from Egypt will give an Egyptian perspective. We will then hear a perspective from Turkey, and finally a perspective on Iran from an Italian expert. Musharraf.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's actually very heartening to hear His Excellency, the Minister of Interior, speaking in such a very comprehensive manner. He started by international fighters and he ended by education, and I think this is what we've been talking about this morning. The title of this panel, From the Arab Spring to Caliphates. I need to see my notes. Okay, thank you. I say that the title of this panel, From the Arab Spring to the Caliphate's State Winter, is very reflective of the thinking and rethinking of millions of Arab citizens. Whether it's Boko Haram, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or the Muslim Brotherhood, many Arabs are gradually coming to the realization that it is different brands of the same product, and it's not the alternative as previously advertised. 1 year of rule of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt has turned many Egyptians and actually many Arabs against political Islam more than ever. Since the political Islam was overthrown nearly 15 months ago, developments in Egypt has had a massive impact on the Arab world, if not at the world at large. And it was very interesting to hear the previous session comparison between Crimea and the Ukraine, what's happening there, and Egypt in the 50s. And I was really hoping to hear comparison with what is happening now and see some discrepancies between reactions, different reactions to similar political developments. The main concern is the gap that exists between the perception of Western democracies and the perception of Egyptians and many Arabs concerning what's happening now. And that's why I say it's very heartening to listen to His Excellency the Minister and how he has encapsulated the problem in a very comprehensive manner. It's not only the international fighters, it's not only the illegal immigration, it's not only the human trafficking, it's the whole idea of manipulating people in the name of religion and turning individuals into terrorists and making them believe that this is for the good of religion. The conclusion in Egypt as we speak, and I have noticed since I arrived yesterday, many people are asking me what's happening in Egypt. There is a gap in perception, really, but I want to tell you that currently the conclusion in Egypt, people think that yes, we overthrew Mubarak, but we've also come to realize that political Islam was a mistake. 4 years, I'm sure you've been following, a lot of unrest and huge economic problems. Egyptians are now more united and more understanding, more tolerant than before. They have found a new ability to be patient. This was not the case for many, many years back. I'm sure you're following. They have put up with power failures. They have put up with higher petrol prices without taking to the streets. They did not demonstrate. When President el-Sisi invited Egyptians a month ago to raise funds for the new national project of enlarging the Suez Canal to create more jobs and increase foreign revenues, he was asking for 60 billion Egyptian pounds, about $8.5 billion, and in less than a week, or in a week, precisely in a week, Egyptians flocked to the bank and 64 billion Egyptian pounds were raised. The interesting statistics is that nearly half of this money came from outside the banking system. More Egyptians are trusting the government with money that they never trusted the banks with. They kept the money at home, away from the banks, but they went and they put this money. So this is really a huge vote of confidence for a new president whom the Egyptian people decided to trust with their hard-earned cash. The domestic situation in Egypt is at its best since even before 2011, as Egyptians are less divided and seem to be collectively rallying behind their president, a president that some perceive as Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser. I'm sure you're all following. But he has the guts to make very difficult economic decisions, that no previous president dared to make, fearing for his popularity, if not for his seats. Such bold decisions like removing the oil subsidies and declaring that in 5 years all subsidies will be removed. They are also moves that show that Egypt is on the right track. We see law and order greatly restored, except for a few sporadic and deadly terrorist attacks. A good sign also is that Egypt has started to repay the money it owed to energy companies, and this is a significant factor in the country's recent power outages. We have a huge energy problem and crisis. Also, several leading multinational companies have recently expressed interest in participating in Egypt's strategic national projects. These are all signs that Egypt may soon be regaining the confidence of foreign investors. As we stand, Egyptian citizens or individuals hold the balance. If they remain united behind the president at this crucial time and help the government make the right difficult decisions, Egypt will pull through. There are huge domestic challenges. I have quickly identified 7 of these challenges, and I will just flag them for the sake of time. The first challenge is completing the political roadmap. Egypt has taken 2 out of 3 steps on the roadmap. Egyptians have voted for a new constitution, which is, meets international criteria, especially when it deals with the human rights and freedoms. Second, they voted for a president. The third step, which will start in 2 weeks, is the parliamentary elections. A very big challenge facing the parliamentary election is that all non-religious political parties are very weak and divided, and up till now, all attempts to form coalition amongst these parties have failed. Very important for the coming parliament is that it will be the strongest parliament. It will share some of the president's mandate for the first time since 1952, when the republic was established. So this parliament will have to pass a battalion of laws to implement the good constitution that we have. Without these laws, the constitution will be just a piece of paper, and this is the real challenge facing Egypt now. The second challenge is about the Salafis, where the Salafis stand. The Salafis supported the removal of the Islamist president in June 30th. They have participated in writing the post-Islamist constitution, which was adopted in 2014, this year. But they have not turned out to vote neither for the constitution nor for the president. And this has raised many question marks about the true position of the Salafis, and it has exposed them to a lot of public criticism. It has cost them their credibility at a time when they were implicitly seeking to position themselves as the link between the mainstream population and collective movement of political Islam. Their true motive remains vague, as they consistently fade off from the political scene at crucial times. So this is really a challenge. The third challenge is fighting the Muslim Brotherhood. Fighting the Muslim Brotherhood is draining the police, and it was very interesting to listen to His Excellency speech. And it will continue to drain the police as long as the police is left alone to deal with this burden. Physically fighting the Brotherhood is a short-term solution, but the proper solution is to eliminate the reasons that help them exist. The real challenge is to combat it, re-educate people, re-educate them about religion and the proper state of religion. We need a rational public debate against religious extremism. The mood in Egypt as we speak is increasingly liberal. We see more women removing the veil and reports of raising atheism, especially among the youth, as clerics lose their grips on more and more Egyptians. And I think this is really the time when we need to start education and we need to start public dialogue. Again, the minister in his speech referred to the international fighters and recruiting youth and the social media, so on and so forth. The sad reality is that political Islam was removed from power, but they still control the minds of many people, especially the youth. And here I would like to flag the question: why would a middle class, educated young man, a fan of rap music, will join ISIS, will go as an international fighter? We must stop and think about this. And this brings me to the following challenge, which is the youth. Like Jane Harman mentioned in the morning, we have youth bulge. The youth is the biggest population. The youth were the one who instigated the January 2011 revolution, and they were the ones who removed the Islamists in June 2013. They feel empowered and they want to be recognized as a political power. El-Sisi has reached out to youth. He took many initiatives. He went to Cairo University to decorate overachiever students. He appointed many young people as assistant ministers, and he appointed many of them in the specialized councils that report directly to him. 2 so far have been established, one on education and one on community empowerment. Also, the Constitution gives youth 25% of the local seats. So now the question, also the President is participating in a dialogue with the youth, which was unleashed by El Ahram newspaper. And with universities opening in few days, we still remain to see whether the youth will go again on demonstrations and rebellions, or they will choose to participate in the upcoming parliamentary elections. The economic situation is a very strong challenge. El-Sisi was very smart. He did not give any economic promises, and he actually managed to lower popular expectations. The biggest challenge currently is achieving social justice while agreeing on its definition. It's still not clear what it stands for. There are some related challenges. The first one is the relation between the state and the private sector. It's still very tense, and the state needs the private sector, but the populist leftist mood is having a negative impact, ambiguity of the tax regime, and the government tendency to turn a blind eye to industrial action fueled by unrealistic expectations since 2011. Unemployment is and will continue to be high. The public education system is in a very bad shape and needs to be overhauling, and this is really where we are feeding terrorists and we are feeding individuals to come in a different way. The energy crisis, which I have talked about, is very serious. Women is the last challenge. Women are the unsung heroes of the revolutions. They have given Egypt a second lifeline, and they are the biggest supporter of Sisi, and he always hails them. In his speeches, in his campaign, he met with women, and he always remembers to talk about women. But women are not better off. Women are not better off, and effectively, the new constitution promises a new improved status, but we still need to pass laws to make this constitution applicable. My last point is the international situation. Whether Egypt is surrounded by problems in Libya, in Yemen, in Sudan, Syria, Iraq, so really Egypt is in a very serious situation. The region's stability has a direct impact on Egypt's national security, and Egypt cannot isolate itself. Recent political developments in Egypt have mostly been welcomed by the Arab region. Egypt has joined the global alliance to fight ISIL, albeit with reservations on the definition of terrorist groups. Gulf countries' support to Egypt is reciprocal, with many Arab countries looking up to Egypt's military and political power in the region. The message addressed by the Saudi King Abdullah to Abdel Fattah al-Sisi when he was elected is very indicative of the pivotal role Egypt will play in the region. It shows how much the region needs Egypt for its strong army. There are some mediation efforts now to remove differences with Qatar and with Turkey. The visit of the president to New York has been very successful, the meeting with President Obama, and we can read the comments that was written in American and European media after the meeting, the statement by President Obama about the crucial role Egypt plays in the American regional security. So, in a nutshell, Egypt's international relations are improving very much, and I must say that the same is happening with the Europeans. El-Sisi made a number of meetings in New York, including with Hollande and Cameron, and I must say that Prime Minister Renzo is among the first European leaders to visit Egypt and meet with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. So there is a new realization that the decision the Egyptian people took on the 30th of June to remove political Islam is the good step for the sake of democracy and for the sake of individuals. I am very hopeful about the future, and Egyptians will not settle for less than respecting human rights of every individual without any discrimination, regardless of religion, gender, political orientation, whatever. It must be an inclusive democratic process, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mashera. Yeah. Cengiz Kandar, thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you for being with us. Cengiz Kandar is a leading journalist in Turkey, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, let me start repeating what Mushira Khattab said about the title of our panel, From the Arab Spring to Caliphate, Caliphate's Winter, which is very, very reflective indeed. But there's a subtitle. It says the US, Europe, and the Middle East. So as much From the Arab Spring to Caliphate's Winter might be a very reflective title. By the same token, we might have another very reflective title, if we would call it, From Introducing Democracy by American Military Force to Pledges No More American Boots on the Territory of the Middle East. And then we could remove from that station of the American strategy or non-strategy to where we are now, as defined by President Obama very recently. Only American superpower and Sunni countries should do the dirty job when it comes to pick ISIS from the territory of the Middle East, which in essence, a correct position, because in essence, ISIS or the Islamic State or Caliphate, whatever you call it, is a tumor that emanated from a Sunni body, from the Sunni societies and lands of the region. So what President Obama defined as a strategy, at the end of the day, after a very long period of vacillation of American approach vis-à-vis the Middle East, being the center of the world in the Kissingerian world order sense, in a unipolar world, a superpower, the sole superpower, vacillating what is to be done in the Middle East and reaching to the point where President Obama finally reached, correct, but not enough to resolve the issues of the Middle East. Because when it comes to eradicate, like our title goes, Caliphate Winter, to finish off with the winter and come back to the Middle Eastern Spring, if it is not Arab Spring only, the Kurdish Spring, Persian Spring, flourishing, blossoming flowers all over the region, we need to get rid of this phenomenon called Islamic State on the heartland, in the geopolitical term, on the heartland of the former Levant and Mesopotamia. And just by depicting IS or ISIS, whatever you call it, I know that there is a matter of semantics and President Obama never says ISIS, because I read that his advisors in the White House told him that Egyptians will be very sensitive about it because of the Isis, the ancient Greek goddess. This is what the American advisors said, and I exactly have the same feeling with you. That I can't imagine any Egyptian would be very sensitive why it is called ISIS. But the White House officials are more sensitive probably than the Egyptians and counseled the president not to call it ISIS but ISIL. So ISIL, ISIS, Islamic State, Caliphate, whatever it is more than what we need to depict it as a terrorist organization. It uses violence, it is very cruel, it is very brutal, but it's not sufficient to call it terrorist. In terms of, within the framework of the President Obama's strategy or the aim of degrading and ultimately destroying it, in terms of morally degrading it, to call it terrorist is fine. But it can't destroy it, because it's more than being a terrorist organization. It's not a ragtag armed forces, armed gangs moving here and there. The territory now, IS controls is more than the combined territory of the Benelux countries, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. So a ragtag terrorist, bunch of terrorists cannot control that amount of territory. So we need to make a correct prognosis of IS. I wish Minister would be here, but he had to go because ministers have many obligations, of course. So I don't want to be in a polemical position vis-à-vis the minister, because after all he's the Minister of Interior, and we have to consider ourselves as guests in this country, and we can't contest ministers of interiors. But in any case, it's not to depart from what he said, but just to complement maybe what he was saying. IS has a terrorist aspect and a lot of Salafi, jihadist, extremist Islamists in its core. The continuation of an organization called Al-Qaeda al-Rafidain, which means Al-Qaeda of Mesopotamia, whose leader was Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, a Jordanian national who was killed in action by the American forces while they were in Iraq. But it grew up to be joined by former generals of Saddam. And in Iraq, in the Arab sociology, the people familiar with it knows, there is a concept developed by Ibn Khaldun, the great sociologist of Tunisian origin. Of course, at that period, 1,000 years ago, there was no Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Iraq in the sense that we pronounce the names. So, in the concept of Asabiyya, the Iraqi regime of Ba'ath regime was composed of, at the leadership, people from the town of Tikrit, because Saddam was from Tikrit. So his brothers, his sons, his cousins were dominating the regime and the intelligence services. The officer corps of the Iraqi army who fought for 8 years against Iran were mainly from the town of Mosul. So when the Americans came through the deep Baathification policies, confronted an Iraqi army who did not put up any fight and evaporated, but not disappeared in person. They went into underground, and now they come up by their officer corps in Mosul to join into IS. Over what? Over the Arab Sunni tribes of the lands that IS controls, from the outskirts of Aleppo all the way to areas near to Baghdad. So this is beyond terrorism. What we need to understand, what is happening, what are the new dynamics in the region. What we are having in the region is a sectarian warfare. It takes the dimension of proxy wars between Iran and the West, Turkey and Iran, Sunni countries of the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, and Iran. Civil wars within civil wars, as the picture of the Sunni world is before us. There is a Turkey-Qatar axis against Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab axis. So IS, the Caliphate, is an organization or a movement that emanated from this very chaotic disorder enforced in the Middle East and in North Africa. If you need to make an analogy, it best suits to the 30 years wars of the European history. And those 30 years wars ended up in Westphalian order. So our 30 years of wars in our part of the region, or world, whether it will take 30 years, less or more, and how it will end, we don't know it yet. It's very chaotic. It is in a disorder what we are passing through. So one interesting element we have to take into consideration, as far as I feel, is that the region of the Middle East, geopolitically, historically, and even culturally, is a part of Europe. At least a crossroads of Eurasia added Eastern and North Africa, that crossroads. So when we look at the European history of the last 100 years, we've seen big border changes, redrawing the maps. When did it occur? After World War I. It happened exactly in the Middle East. The Middle East map, after 400 years, was redrawn when the map of Europe was drawn in the wake of the World War I. The second time when it was drawn, the European map, was after World War II. And there was a new addition to the map of the Middle East, as we used to know it in the geography books. That was the State of Israel. So it was drawn once again. The third time the European map was redrawn was by the end of the Cold War. Just from the Soviet Union, 15 new independent states, countries emerged. From Yugoslavia, 7. Czechoslovakia split into 2. Germany united. And when we look at the Middle East, there is no border changes. It's nearly a quarter of a century since the end of the world. It was also a world war, the Cold War, in a different way. While Europe was passing through those upheavals changing the map, we haven't seen anything in terms of map changes, border changes, redrawing the map of the region. But what we see, a fragmentation. If we are looking at redrawing the maps to replace the Sykes-Picot order, which had been introduced to the region in the wake of the World War I, in those internationally recognized borders of the region, we do have fragmentation. Iraq is a federal country and nobody is very sure and assured whether Iraq will survive, as we used to know it, centered in Baghdad in the way it used to function and existed. Syria, for sure, everybody is very sure that it will never go back to March 15, 2011. It's over. It's fragmented. But what type of a shape it will take, how it will be legitimized or internationally recognized, we don't know it yet. The same situation goes for Libya, Yemen, and this is contagious, of course. It will move over to Saudi Arabia, and even it is shaking the foundations of my country, Turkey. So just to move for a conclusion, I would make a reference to a similar conference. I was again panelist on this side of the mic in the table, and moderator instead of Van Dusen was General David Petraeus. And so the debate was about the future of the Middle East. Actually, you know, John Kenneth Galbraith has a saying that forecasters are divided into two. The ones who knows that they don't know, because all forecasting comes out wrong. There is no forecasting which proves to be true. So he says forecasters are divided into two. The first group, those who knows that they don't know, and the second, that they don't know that they don't know. So I myself, being in the first category, I know that I can't know it. But just as a very general forecasting for the future of the region, I said, despite all your efforts, General Petraeus, by that search strategy you commended in Iraq, Iraq is shaking, trembling now. It will not work. So what the region indicates us as the future is more bloodshed, more turmoil, more turbulence, more chaos. Because the 30 years wars in European history ended when the fighting parties exhausted themselves and came to a compromise and a conclusion for cohabitation. We have in the region still a great deal of energy. So we will shed each other's blood until we are exhausted and until we find our Westphalian system. Until then, what looks ahead, what lies ahead in the region is permanent instability. And he said, very refreshing note indeed, sarcastically he said that the conclusion remarks was very refreshing. He was sarcastic, but only 10 days, literally 10 days after our panel, IS, it was ISIL or ISIS then, entered into Mosul and it declared the Islamic State, and it contributed to the title of panel, From Arab Spring to Caliphate's Winter. So I leave you with this refreshing note, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Cengiz. I think you're optimistic. If it's only 30-year war. Nikolai Petty, we're very happy to have him as a leading Italian expert on Iran, and he came back from Iran yesterday afternoon, and we're very happy to have him here today. Nikolai.
Thank you very much, Mike. And well, being an expert on Iran is a divine capacity which I don't possess. You know, it's one of the most complex political and social structures, I think, in the entire globe. Well, thinking about how to reflect especially the position from inside the Islamic Republic of Iran with respect to the turmoil in the region, I think that there are three main issues that should be addressed from a domestic, international, and regional point of view. Well, the first issue is the domestic one, how things are going in terms of politics in Iran. Well, most of the debate is in these days focusing on the performance of President Rouhani. And this debate is mostly concentrated within the conservative camp. There are, as always, a very heterogeneous and conflicting environment debating on what's going on with the nuclear negotiations and with the other issues. And I have to say, unfortunately, that a certain degree of pessimism is growing in political terms around the figure of the president. I think that he can still count on the support of the leader. The leader is sustaining most of the political plans of the president, and first of all, the nuclear negotiation. It's complex, the position, because I think that the leader is among those who distrust the Western, so he doesn't think that there could be any real option to get something out of it, but he's sustaining it. And this is something new in political terms. Ahmadinejad couldn't count on any real form of approval from the office of the leader, especially in his second mandate. And this is something interesting around Rouhani in this moment. Well, on the other side, there are several concerns in most of the environments which are dealing with economy. As you can imagine, 35 years of embargo had created real economic empires within Iran, and any option to modify the status quo is, of course, creating huge fears in several circles of the Iranian economy. And so there is a debate on this, and there are a lot of criticism around Rouhani for this, also because one of the biggest mistakes of this president, as all the others in Iran, is that still the zero-sum game logic is dominating the political arena in the country. And this is one of the biggest problems they're facing, and they had always faced in their political developments. So not including those dealing with economy in this moment in the process of change is one of the biggest obstacles of this government. On the other side, Rouhani is still representing a bridge among generations, and especially between the first and the second generation, so those who are effectively governing the country. I have to say, I don't think he is really part of nor the first nor the second in real terms. So he is, in terms of age, he is part of the first, but in terms of mentality and in terms of political attitude, is more near to the second. So it's still representing a bridge among the two, and it's trying to put together, especially those who are skeptic of any development on the international debate. One of the biggest problems in the first generation is that still there are several elements of this generation which are genuinely terrified by any hypothesis of dialogue, especially with the US, because they think that this could be the earthquake shaking the pillar of the Islamic Republic. It's completely different within the second generation. They don't have these kind of fears, and so this is one of the issues that Rouhani is trying to put in together. And well, the other main argument of debate is, of course, economy. Things are going, honestly speaking, much better than before. With the end of the Ahmadinejad's presidency, economy has stabilized a little bit. There are less up and down, especially with respect to currency. And yes, the sanctions are hitting, as always had hit Iran. The only one which has a real direct impact on Iran was the one working at the level of the banking system. So the isolation from the banking system is something which is really hurting the system. And on the other side, Iran is used to live with sanctions. They have survived during the war for almost 10 years, selling a small amount of oil at a price of more or less $6. So they're used to survive under sanctions, and this is not really something which is creating a problem. Of course, they are putting this as one of the issues in the debate with the West, and one of the most important requests as a counterpart for the negotiations. But this is more having an effect at the political and social level rather than on an effective help on economy. There is a capacity of Iran of surviving with other countries. There is a capacity of Iran of selling oil and to other counterparts. And so in these terms, I should say that I found the overall situation much better than 1.5 years ago. At the international level, this is probably one of the most problematic. There are a growing pessimism around the P5+1 negotiate. Iran is convinced of the fact that there are forces playing against the negotiation both in Europe and in the United States. They are convinced of the fact that the US administration is sincerely interested in finding a solution with them, but they don't think that they will be able to deliver because of additional factors of lobbies and other group of interest behind the office of the president. So that's why they're fearing the next elections in November, and that's why still they are manifesting optimism for what could be done before the deadline of the end of November. but it's the day after day, the hopes for an agreement are fading out. So what they think is that even a small, empty agreement will be better than nothing. And even a white piece of paper signed by both big parties, the Iran and the others, on the negotiation would be a success for them and for the others. It's those who are thinking that this will be not possible are growing, and I have to say that some of those around the president are reinforcing the lines of those who are becoming pessimists on this. There have been several articles which have been quite harsh against him, especially on Kayhan in the last week. And you know, Kayhan is considered the mouth of the leader, so especially his director, Shariat Madari, is considered the spokesman of the leader. And there have been some articles which were heavily accusing, or basically not accusing, but lamenting the incapacity of the president to deliver on this issue. Then there is the general debate on the relations with the US. After a first phase of huge enthusiasm, still those who are expressing mistrust in any possibility of a relation or rapprochement with the US are growing in terms of numbers. And well, in this, but on this particular side, I have to say that there is a mix of elements which is from one side not helping the process, but on the other side there is a society which is strongly interested and willing to achieve rapprochement with the US. The vast majority of the Iranians are in favor of the dialogue with the US, are in favor of a rapprochement, and are pressing politically on both the administration and the unelected elements of the government. The last one, which is probably the most problematic, is the regional framework. Well, let's start from ISIS and Iraq. Iran has been the first country intervening in Iraq. 24 hours after the invasion, let's call it, even it's not probably correct the terms, of Iraq, General Soleimani, the commander of the Quds force, flew to Baghdad. And if Baghdad is not in the hands of ISIS, probably, I don't want to say it's because of him, but it's also because of him. Iranians have been able to coordinate the actions of most of the Shia militias coming from the south, regrouping around Baghdad and Samarra, and at least stopping the flows toward the capital. They've helped a portion of the Kurds on the other side, and they have been among the first. And it's interesting what they think about ISIS and the potential of ISIS. They don't think it's a threat for Iran. They don't think it's a threat for the rest of Iraq. So they don't think that ISIS could be a threat for southern Iraq. They think that southern Iraq is quite stable and protected by its own forces. They think that ISIS is not a threat for Europe. They think that ISIS is a threat for most of the Sunni government of the region, and more in particular at the moment for Saudi Arabia and for Jordan. The Iranians are worried in Iraq because they know that ISIS basically fought no battles in Iraq. There was just a skirmish in Mosul. And for the rest of the so-called invasions, they have been able to penetrate the Iraqi territory almost unchallenged and even welcomed by most of those living in that part of the country. And this is something which is really worrying the Iranians. The fact that it will be really difficult to dismantle the role of ISIS from that region. They are criticizing the impact of the coalition led by the US in the region bombing the ISIS position for several reasons. First, because they think that this is an operation most oriented at hitting Syria and Bashar al-Assad rather than ISIS forces in Syria and Iraq. Second, because they think it's ineffective. And third, because this coalition is perceived in the region not as a regional coalition, but as a US-led coalition. So there is another interesting point around this, and this is linked to the enthusiasm that in certain Western countries, the capacity of Iran in fighting against ISIS has alimented a certain debate. Well, some of those dealing with Iran in the West were thinking that even if the nuclear dialogue was failing, the cooperation with Iran could have been possible on the ground in order to face ISIS. Well, this is not the case in Iran. This is really the red line which have been posed by the leader to President Rouhani. Iran is not willing to cooperate with the US or with any other forces on the ground if the nuclear debate, the nuclear dialogue will fail. They don't want to be involved in these specific issues and failing on the others. This is something which has been clearly stated by the authorities. And they deny any form of cooperation or even coordination. Well, it is clear, and everybody is talking about the fact that there have been a coordination between the US and General Soleimani on the ground. It's clear, it would have been not possible to coordinate this kind of action, especially in Amerli. But this is the red line that the government is not willing to accept in the conflict on the ground. And so this is something that should not be perceived as a possibility, as an opening, because the only real thing that Iran is asking is to work on the P5+1 dialogue with a more comprehensive agenda. This is the framework. And the idea of cooperating on side elements, I think it's extremely difficult. With respect to the other two issues, and then I conclude, well, one is Syria, of course, and the other one is Saudi Arabia. Let's start with Syria. As you know, Iran considered the war in Syria as an artificial crisis. What is probably not perceived in the West is that Iran had been, and still is, very critical on Bashar al-Assad. They think that Bashar al-Assad is part of the problem, that Bashar al-Assad was the guy who created at the beginning the problem in using the iron fist in Syria. And using the iron fist in Syria, he had helped foreign fighters coming first through Jabhat al-Nusra and then through ISIS. They don't even consider the Free Syrian Army, and honestly speaking, I think that they're serious enough to don't consider the Free Syrian Army a real alternative, at least at the moment. Well, so the only real groups which are considered as opponents of the regime on the ground are jihadists. The only groups which are being taken as a serious threat to the regime are the jihadist forces which are competing among ourselves, and where ISIS, of course, is considered the most dangerous among them. They know that the regime is crumbling. They know that Bashar al-Assad cannot survive forever in this kind of situation. What they fear is a post-Bashar al-Assad Syria in the hands of the jihadists. And they fear that there is no possibility of a viable solution if a national debate in Syria is not started by someone, including Syrian society. Saudi Arabia, which is probably one of the most crucial issues, and the last one in this short attempt of analysis from inside Iran. Iranians have adopted in the last weeks a new language. If you look at what they say on the press, they're not accusing anymore Saudi Arabia of being the black beast of all the crisis. They are trying to find a way to negotiate at least a little bit with Saudi Arabia. They're not optimistic on this, but they're trying to do it. And there is a specific order from the top. Do not attack Saudi Arabia anymore in verbal terms. They don't think that there is a sectarian conflict. The idea of Iran is that there is a tiny group within the Sunni, the Wahhabis, which are declared war to the Shia and all the others in the region. What they fear is that this is the product of a huge fear in Saudi Arabia linked to the transition of power of this, let's call it generational transition that sooner or later will be affecting the future of the kingdom. They are aware of the fact that the Saudis are considering Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood two existential threats. The idea of Iran is that Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood, even if Iran is not liking the Muslim Brotherhood at all, they are among the few sponsors of General al-Sisi in the region. And, but despite this, the Iranians think that the fear of Saudi Arabia is mostly based on the fact that the Iranian model and the Muslim Brotherhood model is bringing something new in the Muslim concept of political power. So if not promoting pluralism, at least accepting pluralism within it. And this is something which is considered an existential threat by someone in Saudi Arabia. So this is the position of Iran. I think that there are few possibilities that better relations could emerge in the near future. There are growing concerns for, even in the last couple of days, due to the attack that have been portrayed in Balochistan, and given also the fear of Iran of being completely sidelined in the regional process. What Iran is asking in this moment is to be inserted in the regional dialogue. What Iran is lamenting is to have been systematically put aside from any regional issue, and what they're still fearing is that there are some interests, especially in the West, not willing to deal at all with the Islamic Republic. Iranians are not naive, honestly, in analysis, and they know that in the US there are still some political circles which are not accepting the idea of a dialogue with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that whatever could happen during the dialogue and during these kind of negotiations, the interest is that of promoting regime change. So this is something which is affecting, of course, the capacity of delivering from the Iranian side. And that's why I think that this last month, in order to, before the end of the deadline, is really crucial, because I am convinced on my side that even an empty agreement is better than nothing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. The hour is late. You've been very patient all day. I want to open the floor for a few minutes. There's an awful lot of issues in the Middle East, but the position of Turkey, the position of Iran, and the position of Egypt are extraordinarily important in how the 30, 40-year war is going to take shape. I have a question there. 2 questions. Yes. 3. We'll take 10 minutes or so.
Thank you. Alberto Tonini, University of Florence, Italy. My comment is for Madame Mushira Khattab. You mentioned the need to understand the reasons why the Muslim Brotherhood was so popular in your country. And I completely agree with you about this urgency. I'm sorry to say, I think Mr. al-Sisi is not the right person to do that. In my opinion, he is not the solution. He is part of the problem, I'm sorry to say. Egyptian economic disaster, corruption in Egypt, social frustration are not the outcomes of one-year Muslim Brotherhood rule. I agree President Morsi was completely inadequate for this post. But Egyptian problems have most ancient roots. And Mr. al-Sisi was a close advisor of President Mubarak. His last election was greeted by the King of Saudi Arabia, who, again, in my view, is part of the larger problems in the region. So I think that for the sake of democracy, for democracy promotion in the region, we should be much more prudent in giving our support to persons who have such a background. Thanks.
2 minutes. Very quick.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I agree with you. The problems of Egypt are not the product of 1 year of Muslim Brotherhood. This is true. Very ancient accumulation over many, many years. What I said was that 1 year of Muslim Brotherhood rule made Egyptians turn against political Islam. They did not find the solution. Whether you think El-Sisi is the right person or not, this is something you respectively decide. But what happened is that the people decided, they went to the ballots and they voted and they said, he is the man we want. And we have to respect that. I gave some indications how the people support him. When he asked to go and buy some bonds for the Suez Canal, they flocked and they collected the money in 1 week, even more than what he asked for. He raised the price of certain commodities, removed subsidies. They didn't take to the streets to protest. So I am reading the popular support of El-Sisi from effective movements, practical movements. The elections of El-Sisi were internationally monitored. There were no reports of rigging the elections. Same on the constitution. There are certain population that boycotted the election, which is the Islamists. Like I said, Salafis, part of political Islam, they were with it, and they still claim to be with it. This is the only thing I can say to answer you. The problems of Egypt need diligent reform, and it will take time. But you have to make difficult decisions, and the people happen to trust this man to make such difficult decisions. I'm only hoping that he will be able to continue the reform, because Egypt needs the reform. And right now, Egypt enjoys very strong backing by practically all Arab countries, and the international recognition is getting stronger every day, like I have put it in my intervention. Thank you.
I would like to ask a question to the Turkish and Iranian. I want to make a point there. Why is the Turkish army standing by and not intervening in the massacre of all the Kurds in the north of near the Turkish border? They're just waiting at the border because ISIS is doing their work for them. And Iranian, they say they don't want to get involved in the conflict, in the thing, but there has always been and always coming back to the issue of Shias and Sunnis. Assad might not have been a very good dictator, whatever you want to call him, but under him at least, the Catholics, the Shias, and the Sunnis lived together, which they won't do under neither Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has, you can't call Saudi Arabia a democracy, because women are not allowed to drive, they're not allowed to do this, they're not allowed to do that. There's no human rights in Saudi Arabia. But because it's an alliance, it's a country where we take petrol from, we let them get away with this. I think it's a little bit of a hoax saying we want human rights and democracy. Democracy, you can't import democracy. They've got to learn from the basis what is human rights. Sorry, this is my personal opinion to this thing.
Cengiz, do you want to comment on that? Yeah. Yeah.
I am very well known in my country being very, very critical to Turkish government position on what's going on next to its borders. So maybe I am the right person to ask this question. Maybe the person who shouldn't answer this question at all is myself from the vantage point of the government. They would think that I am very prejudiced against their policies. I'm not, because I supported many acts that they had performed. But when it comes to the gist of the question you ask, actually you have given the answer. Why it's not intervening when the Kurds on the border was under the risk of a massacre. The reason, the very simple reason, is when the central authority in Syria collapsed, which means the Syrian regime cannot extend its sovereign authority to every part of Syria. The Kurds of Syria, who are inhabiting the areas next to Turkish borders, declared self-rule. And they have three, as they call it, Kurdish cantons. There is no territorial continuity to it. In between, there are Arab areas controlled by ISIS, but still, there is a territorial dispute going on between ISIS or any Arab element confronting with the Kurds. But for Turkey, the presence and existence of all the Kurdish self-ruling entities next to its border are presenting a precedent for Turkey's Kurds, who constitute more than 50% of the entire Kurdish population of this world. And Turkey, being a country much more institutionalized, much more progressed compared to other two neighbors who the Kurds are functioning in, like Syria and Iraq, and having such a precedent while we are having a quasi-independent Kurdish state in the northern part of Iraq, added with a Kurdish self-ruling entities next to the Turkish borders. And when we speak of common frontiers between Turkey and Syria, maybe for many of us, it's impossible to visualize. It's a flat land. The frontier is the railroad line. So the north of the railroad line is Turkey, the south of it is Syria. And the settlements over the railroad line, which goes to the Ottoman times before the frontier was drawn between France and Turkey in the year 1921, were the same villages, same towns, same cities. And they were inhabited by the Kurds. So one morning they woke up as citizens of Turkey and the others as citizens of Syria. But they were the same people. So now what's going on? Next to Turkey's borders, it's a 910-kilometer long border. It's a very long border, by the way. The Kurdish self-rule is a precedent for Turkey's Kurds. So for the Turkish government, through ISIS or through anybody else, to end that Kurdish self-rule is much more a matter of priority than fighting against ISIS. It's more an existential threat in the perception of the Turkish state than ISIS. And by the same token, when it comes to joining the US-led coalition against ISIS, the Turkish position, which is formulated several times very recently by the President and by the Prime Minister, says, all right, we do participate in the coalition that you are trying to form. But there are three conditions. First, let's have safe havens within the Syrian territory. Two, those safe havens should be protected by no-flight zones, which needs a Security Council resolution. Then you, the Americans, make a promise to train and equip the opposition, which is Free Syrian Army. As Nicola said, they don't exist, actually. So it's just a reference point, but it doesn't exist. So by these preconditions, by these prerequisites, actually what Turkish government is doing is declaring to the Americans that we are not with you in this effort. But putting in the diplomatic niceties with all these nutshell, three conditions. First, you have to be against the regime, and in order to prove that you are against the regime, you have to support our position of establishing safe havens within the Syrian territory to be protected by no-flight zones, plus your commitment for training and equipping the Syrian opposition. This is the Turkish position.
Two final questions, the lady here and then the gentleman at the corner.
University. Thank you very much for a very interesting panel. Because the panel is called also the differences between the US and the EU, and this was more the regional perspective. Oh, a regional perspective was more the one presented. I was wondering whether in your discussion, which you were saying that there are many points in which stakes from the region are raised. It's like we are not going to cooperate, but cooperate under these conditions which Mr. Chandar just mentioned, or we are going to be cooperative partners with the Iranians, but under specific conditions. To what degree is your perspective on the European and the Americans also thinking about certain concessions, because there might be ways in which in this situation they may be not able to form coalitions and fight ISIL, and it's clear that ISIL is the really problematic thing that Western powers have to encounter. So in that sense, I would like to ask you whether you see any movement in this direction. Whether it's a good movement or bad movement, it's irrelevant. But also the other thing is whether there are differences between the US and how the EU handles it. Thank you.
Let's take the last question, and then panelists can answer.
It's connected with the previous question. So I was asking, since I think ISIS is the main problem for world stability, and I think also that without Russia and without Iran, it will be impossible to solve the problem of ISIS. What could do more Europe to favor a dialogue between US and Russia and US and Iran to cope with the ISIS problem? And we connect with the previous panel. I think that we should make any effort to solve the Ukrainian crisis in order to make an alliance between the Western world and Russia to cope with ISIS. Let's say that we Europeans have to help Americans to choose the real enemies and the real allies. There are too many people in Washington and Moscow that miss the Cold War.
Do any of you want to comment? Yes, Genghis and Nikolai, and Mushir if you want.
I'll try to give a European perception. Well, first of all, an European foreign policy doesn't exist. So this is the first element which is affecting the capacity of influencing or helping or doing whatever in solving the problem. There are huge divergences also on the nature of the threat, because apart from the massive talk on ISIS, from the operational point of view, we are talking about something which is quite different in terms of military threat, in the sense that the bulk of ISIS is in Syria. The vast majority of their logistical and economic capacity is there. It will be really difficult to hit them there under the actual conditions. The number of fighters within ISIS fighting in Iraq is not relevant in general terms. The problem is not the number of fighters or the capacity of these fighters. We have been, of course, shocked because they were beheading Europeans and Americans, and that's why there was this tremendous fear around them. We are not talking about something which is effectively tough from a military point of view. The threat is how to dismantle the chain behind them. ISIS is growing more and more Iraqi rather than international. We are talking about foreign fighters, we are talking about the threat of all the passports which have been found in Syria and Iraq. The problem with ISIS is that the component which is fighting within Iraq at the moment is mostly linked to the Naqshbandi, so to the group of those who were near to Saddam's army, and especially to the Republican Guard. We are fighting people which is deeply rooted in that region and which have entered this region without fighting. We are not talking about the real invasion. This is also because of a series of mistakes, not only from the US, from Europe, from the others. One of the biggest mistakes was producing the effect of ISIS in the region is the policy of al-Maliki and of the Shia community in Iraq, and of course of Iran behind them, not including systematically for 10 years the Sunni communities in politics, demolishing any capacity of participation, blindly supporting from Tehran especially the al-Maliki government until the last second, because al-Maliki was supported by Tehran even when it was too late. Also Washington, but just to balance that, it's not always the West that we have to blame. In this sense, even if I can recognize the reason of Tehran for 99% of the other issues, we have to say that there have been a huge mistake also on that side. And ISIS was, the war to ISIS in Iraq started when General Soleimani was sent to Baghdad, spoke to al-Maliki and said, you have to go, you have to leave, because this is not the way we can conduct politics in this region. So it's difficult to assess which could be the effective capacity of dealing with this threat. I think that there is a huge confusion also in the West, and also in Europe. There are a lot of problems affecting the real capacity of providing a solution. Europeans are confused in terms of the nature of the threat. Europeans are confused in the nature of the possible answer, are confused on the nature of their capabilities, especially in economic terms, because one of the things that it's affecting our capacity is the fact that we are closing two very long and dramatic missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and this is also, of course, affecting the capacity of opening new ones. So I don't expect anything really big from the European point of view in these terms. What can be done, in my opinion, is working at a regional level. And working at a regional level means involving Iran, means adding Iran in the pictures, means calling the responsibilities of some of the actors. Denying the fact that there is a clear Saudi responsibility behind most of these factors is a big mistake. Denying the fact that the Saudis are behind most of these groups still now, it's a big mistake. And this is something which is affecting the capacity of the Europeans of taking a decision. Final point, Iran and the US, how can the EU could help? Well, history proved that Europeans have been the worst ally of rapprochement. Any idea of a better relation between Iran and the US have been basically a nightmare in Europe for several reasons, for economic reasons, for political reasons. Through the divide et impera logic, we have survived managing our strange relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran, keeping our friendship with the United States. I'm honestly very critical on the European side on this. I think that they have played their best in order to sabotage any attempt. They have sabotaged, most of the Europeans, the dialogue of the P5+1. If you have not reached a result, it's not because of the US at the moment, it's mostly because of the Europeans. So most of the responsibilities of this failure has to be found here in this continent. And well, what I hope that there could be a rapprochement. I think that the US and Iran are national allies in the region. But I'm not sure when it will happen, in a day, in a month, or in 10 years. But I think that this is a natural consequence of the fact that they share most of their interests in the region. I don't think that there will be a crisis putting them together, but there will be a process in this sense.
Let's hope it doesn't take 30 years. Genghis, you don't. Mushira, 1 minute?
One minute. I just want to say, let's not be distracted by side issues. Let's look at the root causes of this never-ending stories of different groups using religion. There is a French producer called Michael Parazan. He had a documentary called La Confrérie, the Brotherhood, and he followed the history of such movements. And this is really what we should be looking at, the causes. What caused this? Following to this, I would say that ISIS is too small to be or to warrant a global armed action. It is too small. We must not be distracted by this. We must look at the notion, not ISIS, the state, but ISIS, the notion, because every once in a while we have a new brand of the same product. So we should not be distracted by this. We're living in a time of nation states where all citizens are equal, entitled to same rights without any discrimination as to religion or what have you. All these movements are very discriminatory. It uses religion to divide people. So this is the only thing I have to say at the end of such a long and very fruitful day, really. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody here. I fail utterly as a moderator. It's taken 35 minutes longer to get through this session than we were meant to. But I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Mushira and Nikolai and Cengiz for very interesting and very helpful remarks. On behalf of Paolo Mesa and Blair Rubel and Sam Wells and Herman van der Vee, I pronounce this alumni meeting of today to be over. And I want to thank you for all of you for being here, and especially to the staff of the Center for American Studies in Rome for all they've done to make today such a successful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We must thank you for all your efforts, the Wilson Center and CAS.